So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining OFIA today for our second webinar of this year's Human Development and Sexual Health Speaker Series. My name is Heather Gardner. I'm a teacher and a curriculum consultant here at OFIA, and I'm very excited to be moderating today's webinar. Today we'll be sharing information on strategies and scenarios for creating an inclusive and emotionally safe learning environment. This workshop has been developed with the support of Sudbury and District Health Unit and will be co-presented with EGAL, Canada Human Rights Trust, and the Sudbury and District Health Unit. During today's webinar, we will explore strategies for creating an emotionally safe learning environment for implementation of the 2015 Health and Physical Education curriculum. We'll explore how OFIA's H&PE curriculum resources from grades 1 to 8 can support inclusive education, and we'll explore scenarios and strategies developed by community partners to create an inclusive and emotionally safe learning environment. To start us off, I wanted to provide a quick overview of OFIA for those who may be unfamiliar with our organization or the services that it offers. OFIA is proud to be a provincial subject association for health and physical education and a leader in developing quality H&PE curriculum implementation supports for educators, public health professionals, and community program leaders. With the release of the Ontario Curriculum Grades 1 to 8 Health and Physical Education, including the updated Human Development and Sexual Health expectations, Ontario is providing children and youth with educational opportunities that enable them to develop the necessary skills and knowledge to make lifelong choices for healthy, safe, and active living. OFIA works with an extensive network across Ontario and Canada, including teachers, educational assistants, community coaches, recreational program leaders, program assistants, as well as parents. Health and physical education is an essential aspect of student achievement and overall healthy development of children and youth. As such, OFIA has a variety of resources available to support student learning. As we'll discuss later in the webinar, OFIA's H&PE curriculum resources, grades 1 to 8, are one of the many resources available from the OFIA Teaching Tools website. Now let's get started. If we ask you to close your eyes and think about your wishes for your students related to health education, what thoughts, sounds, and scenes pop into your mind? We'll have you share some of those responses right now in the chat window. In order to support our students and student learning in health and physical education, emotional safety is key. So let's see what some of your thoughts are. So when it comes to health education, what thoughts, sounds, and scenes pop into your mind? So I'm not seeing anyone typing. So let's see, what are some of those wishes? What do you hope for your students when it comes to health education? What are your thoughts? What do you see when you see a successful health education program? What does it look like? Oh, there we go. I love it. Multiple attendees are typing. Yes, my favorite words. They're enjoying themselves. Thanks, team from TDSB. Dispelling myths. Awesome, Matt. Lots of folks are writing that they feel comfortable coming to us to talk about these sensitive topics. Great. Like we have a couple more folks who are typing there. What does Sean say? Smiles, caring for themselves and others, meeting all students' needs. Excellent. And Kate says they're more concerned about having fun rather than competition. Certainly. They're active and they're improving. These are great responses. So in order to support student learning and health education, an emotionally safe environment is key. Our goals for today's webinar will connect to this specific area as one of the fundamental principles in health and physical education, and one area that we know is key to support student learning. Now, before we hear from our partners, let's start off by busting some myths and responding to questions that you might be hearing and looking to understand, examining why this topic is so important. So let's get started. Here's a question that is created by CCAN, the Sexual Information and Education Council of Canada. Please chat with those who might be observing the webinar with you, or reflect on your own to the question on the screen. Please share your response in the poll, and let's talk about what we think, why we think we need sexual health education in schools. There we go. So we have it in the poll. Why do we need sexual health education in schools? Part of our overall health. Great. And you should be able to see the responses that we're getting. Students are curious about their body and relationships. Again, it's part of overall health. So students get factual information and not Googled information. Students are getting their information from the internet to provide them with accurate information and make informed choices, a place to get answers without having to ask questions. Great responses. Parents may not share with them about it. It makes for a mentally sound student. And take a look and see what CCAN has to say. So again, the Sexual Information and Education Council of Canada is where this is adapted from. Questions and answers from their updated 2015 Ontario edition. So according to the Public Health Agency of Canada, sexual health is a key aspect of personal health and social welfare that influences individuals across their lifespan. Because sexual health is a key component of overall health and well-being, sexual health education should be available to all Canadians as an important component of health promotion and services. As stated by the Public Health Agency of Canada, 2008, since schools are the only formal education institution to have meaningful and mandatory contact with nearly every young person, they are in a unique position to provide children, adolescents, and young adults with the knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes they need to make and act upon decisions that promote sexual health throughout their lives. Let's move on to question number 2. So we've got 4 questions here, and again, I'll open up the polls. So what do you think? Does providing youth with sexual health education lead to earlier or more frequent sexual activity? Now, I'm sure you know the answer already. So how can this answer be used, how can you use this answer to share it with your school community? And once again, let's respond in the chat. In the poll. So once again, what do you think? Does providing youth with sexual health education lead to earlier or more frequent sexual activity? And how can the answer to this question be shared with your school community? No, so of course, it's very clear. It does not lead to earlier or more frequent sexual activity. But let's take a look at the second part. So how can we share that with our community? To create a healthier attitude, parent info meetings, sharing research to dispel the myth. All right, so we are going to move on to our third question. Thanks again for all those great answers. Lots of ways we could be sharing this content and the information. So again, according to CCAN, the impact of sexual health education on the sexual behavior of youth has been extensively examined in a large number of evaluation research studies. A meta-analysis of 174 studies examining the impact of different types of sexual health promotion interventions found that these programs do not inadvertently increase the frequency of sexual behavior or number of sexual partners. More specifically, a review of 66 studies measuring the behavioral impact of broadly based sexual health education for youth that included information on abstinence, contraception, and STI/HIV prevention concluded that such programs do not hasten or increase sexual behavior, but rather that they result in reductions in both sexual activity and frequency of sexual activity among adolescents compared to adolescents not receiving the intervention. Other reviews of studies measuring the effects of sexual health education have all reached the same conclusion. Sexual health education does not result in earlier or more frequent sexual behavior. Now here is our third of 4 questions. Why is it important to integrate the educational needs of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students into school-based sexual health education? So I know by now you know the routine, so let's see some of those answers into our poll. All students are represented and valued. Inclusion, the Charter of Rights, bullying prevention, provide safe environment and prevent bullying. All students have a right to sexual health education, to stop discrimination before it starts. Let's see, any other responses before we move on? Right, to avoid stigma. Okay, let's end this one up and see what CCAN has to say. So CCAN shares that in the past, sexual health education in schools tended to focus primarily, if not exclusively, on providing information within a heterosexual context. And this often left lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students without the relevant and necessary information to make informed decisions to protect and enhance their sexual health. Most school classrooms will have one or more students who are not heterosexual. In a demographic study of junior and high school students by the Toronto District School Board in 2013, 8% of grade 9 to 12 students identified themselves as non-heterosexual, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, or queer, or not sure and questioning in relation to their sexual orientation. Similar percentages of youth identified gay, lesbian, bisexual, questioning, or mostly straight in a large sample survey of high school students in British Columbia. Due to experiences of bullying, discrimination, and stigmatization, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth often remain an invisible population in schools. The Public Health Agency of Canada's Canadian Guidelines for Sexual Health Education 2008 suggests that educational curricula should address the sexual health needs of all students, including those who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or questioning. As well, the guidelines note that an understanding of sexual diversity perspectives and issues is an important component of sexual health education. Thus, the sexual health education needs of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender students should be integrated within broadly based sexual health education in schools. A supportive, non-threatening environment has been recognized as being one protective factor that can potentially reduce the risk of negative health and social outcomes among youth, according to the Public Health Agency of Canada, 2010. However, EGAL Canada's national survey of more than 3,700 students on homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia in Canadian schools found that 64% of LGBT students felt unsafe at school, and 21% reported that they had been physically harassed or assaulted because of their sexual orientation. In addition to the provision of LGBT-inclusive sexual health education, schools can foster peer acceptance, school connectedness, and student safety by facilitating and supporting the development of gay-straight alliances. An Ontario survey by the Ontario Student Trustee Association in 2011 found that 79% of parents and 88% of students agreed that students should be allowed to set up a gay-straight alliance at their school. For our final question, how can you create a supportive and inclusive sexual health learning environment? How can you create a supportive and inclusive sexual health learning environment? Great answer. Offering opportunities for students' questions, respectful delivery and participation in class, by having several supportive staff members participate in teaching and discussing with students. Awesome one. Be aware of the language and terminology used all year long, not just for 1 or 2 lessons. No assumptions about sexual orientation and gender identity of students. Good one. Wait a few more seconds to see if there's anything else. A welcoming classroom. Perfect. We will end on that one. So to help us explore some of these answers, there are a number of community partners who you can access for information and additional resources to help you create an emotionally safe learning environment. We will now hear from our partners who will share scenarios and responses which will help us as educators navigate instruction and student learning related to content from human development and sexual health. Let's get started with Tracy Orderkirk and Eric Paquette from Sudbury and District Health Unit.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to start off with the role of public health in support of the HPE curriculum. And public health units are one of the most valuable sources of support in our community for health and physical education programs, as they can provide health expertise in a number of areas that are relevant to the curriculum, such as healthy eating, physical activity, tobacco, injury, substance misuse, and sexual health, just to name a few. The Ontario Public Health Standards require public health professionals to work with school boards and schools using a comprehensive health promotion approach. In Ontario, there are 36 public health units across the province that provide health programs and services to support their communities. But the structure of each health unit throughout the province may vary slightly. Here in Sudbury, the Sudbury and District Health Unit's school health promotion team works on improving the health and educational outcomes of children and youth within our schools. Through our strengths-based approach to creating healthy schools, we focus on strategies that support and enhance resilience and building and fostering developmental strengths and positive relationships within our school communities. This ultimately strengthens the health and educational outcomes of the school and allows the whole school community to thrive. So examples of what could be possibly offered by your local health units are health and physical education, teacher, parent, and classroom resources to support the HPE curriculum. This may also include public health nurse consultations, and where they can provide you with anatomy models, birth control kits, recommended websites, lesson plans, activities and resources, as well as professional development for teachers. So now as we move on, I'll introduce you to Tracy, who's my colleague, and she'll be going over the next couple of slides with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with a scenario this is actually an example of an activity that we have done ourselves in schools following the teachers teaching of the curriculum. It's kind of a follow-up activity. For our scenario, we've put a Q&A question box. So you have recently completed your class on puberty. You've asked your students to put any question they might have in a Q&A box, and you received the following 2 questions. Why do girls have periods? And 2, why do boys get unexpected erections and wet dreams? These are just 2 examples that we kind of picked out of kind of a hat. We have over thousands of questions that we've received over the years. A really good point is if you do attempt to use this activity to really keep an inventory of your questions and the answers that you've researched, making sure that you're using reputable websites and information to answer those questions, and just remind yourself to make sure that you're using plain language and proper terminology at all times. Often you will get slang terminology, or sometimes they try to shock you with some of the terminology. So just kind of make sure that you bring it back to that proper terminology. Sexuality and You is one of the resources that we use with getting that accurate information, and I'll talk about more of those resources. Always Changing is also a recommended one from us. So for strategies on how to address the questions, we came up with 3 different strategies. The first one is creating a safe environment. So part of creating that safe environment is really one of the things that we would recommend is ground rules. So I know that most classrooms do have ground rules, and it's kind of monitoring like the behavior in the classroom and that type of thing, but it's really good to revisit those ground rules and then add a few things to make sure that confidentiality is assured with the students when they're asking questions, make sure that students are reminded to be respectful, and not to share personal stories or names when they share different things or ask different questions is really key. Another part of creating that safe environment is encouraging teachers to establish that positive, caring relationship with their students. Often when we do our consultations, teachers, we kind of recommend that wait and do your unit later in the year, like not at the end of the year necessarily, but later in the year once you've gotten to know your classroom, you've gotten to have build relationships with your students. It creates that safer environment, and students will feel supported, and you become a little more credible and respected from the class because you've built that relationship. Another point, too, is make sure that you give prior notice to the unit. It allows the students to become emotionally and mentally prepared for what's happening. They're going to giggle, and they're going to possibly, flush into different shades of pink when you do discuss the different topic, but it's really important for them to know that this is coming and for them to kind of be mentally prepared. So that's the first one. Now, number 2 is normalizing and providing accurate information. And so what we thought was, number 1 is make sure that you're using proper terminology at all times. They're going to use slang terminology. Again, I talked about that earlier, but just bring it always back to the proper terminology. Really be aware of how you're coming across to your students. Body language is huge. If you feel really uncomfortable yourself with the information, they're going to pick up on that. So it's going to make them uncomfortable. So really familiarize yourself with the answers to your questions. Give yourself time to prepare for your Q&A, and then that will help you feel a little bit more confident. Your attitude as well. If you have to stay neutral and not judgmental. Even if your personal views are different, you have to make this, kind of express that this is a normal part of healthy development and that they need to know this information, and that's how you kind of get by that. A positive attitude is really important, again, and to make that normally a normal part, healthy part of life, that this is something that's going to happen. They're also, if they have the information, we know that they're going to be less scared, they don't, when these changes start to happen, they'll be better prepared for that. Another key point is to be honest. If you don't know the answer to a question, we use that as a learning opportunity. It's a great way to be kind of credible. But if you don't know the information, you can let them know that, and it could become a learning opportunity. You can research it together, make it a project. It's a great opportunity for that, for personal growth as well as for growth for the students. Be concrete, give factual information appropriate to the age and maturity of the group. So sometimes some of the questions you'll get may not be appropriate for the grade level. So you need to look at that as well and kind of, address it in a different way. Again, give concrete tips, not personal stories. You want when we talk about concrete tips, say for an example, when the question number 1 was the period or menstruation question, give them concrete tips on what would you do if this happened at school, and problem solve that together. Same with the unwanted erection or those types of things. How would they navigate that situation? So doing that together. Number 3 was assuring your values and beliefs do not influence the information you are sharing. Give yourself time to review the questions ahead of time. So when we do the box, it's confidential. Everyone gets a slip, a question card. Everyone puts a slip in the box, even if they don't have a question, so you're ensuring confidentiality. You can give them time to take the sheet home, and then they can bring it the next day and be discreet. It also allows you to be prepared and not caught off guard. Sometimes some of the questions may throw you off, and you may feel uncomfortable, so it gets you better prepared. You can also organize your classroom lesson, kind of clumping different similar questions together and kind of addressing maybe the less difficult ones at first and gradually build up to something that's a little bit more sensitive. So that's a different way to approach it. So it's really important to make sure that you're expressing that this is normal and it's a healthy part of development. We do an activity called Common Ground, and it's kind of a little activity where you ask them a bunch of questions, and if they agree with your statement, they will step forward. So you ask them different things about, do you like to dance? And then they'll step forward, or stand forward if you like to eat fruit or whatever. Like it's different questions, and then you'll throw in a few of the questions that are a little bit more challenging, like about puberty or about emotions or different things like that, or hygiene or whatever. And at the end of it, you mention or you kind of reiterate that, everyone is going to go through this phase of development, and that it's normal. Everyone in the room has either gone through it, or they will be going through it, or are currently going through it. So it just kind of normalizes it and makes them feel a little bit more comfortable that this is a normal part of life. So in terms of the actual questions, I'm just going to give you a couple tips about how to address them. With menstruation, it's really important to provide basic information, making sure that you're kind of connecting to a simple concept they might already be familiar with. So for example, I know in different classes they talk about like the water cycle or the butterfly cycle, or even tadpoles and how they kind of go through changes, and it kind of normalizes it again as something that they're familiar with, and it makes it more normal, and adding information that's appropriate for the menstruation piece. And then for the second question, reassure that wet dreams are normal. They usually happen in stage 4 of male development, and that they may happen often, they may happen infrequently or not at all, and that's all normal. And again, refer to the different websites. I'm just going to talk about those in a second for your accurate information, more detailed information about those specific answers. So for resources, we recommend on our website, we have our top 5 recommended websites. OSEA has a wealth of information. They have lots of lesson plans there and supportive pieces to support you in your teaching. Always Changing is a wonderful resource. We've used it ourselves. There's a teacher's guide. There is a student booklet that students can take home to review on their own time, and kind of, if they have questions, they can look in that booklet as well. On YouTube, they have Always Changing videos as well that you can use to augment your teaching. Your local health unit has a wealth of information and supports. Some of the supportive pieces that Eric mentioned earlier, we provide those for loan to our teachers. We will meet one-on-one with our teachers to support them. And in different instances, depending on the teacher's comfort level, we can support them in different ways. Sometimes it is assisting them with their teaching in the classroom. So it depends on the situation. But the real objective is to empower teachers to teach this on their own. Additional websites that aren't on the slide are Health Canada. They have a lot of accurate information. I mentioned this before, Sexuality in You. It's one of our number one ones that we go to for accurate information and activities and lesson plans and those types of things. TeachingSexualHealth.ca is an Alberta Health Services website. They have wonderful things there, lesson plans, quizzes, different things like to support your teaching as well. So that's basically my presentation for my part. If you have any questions, just you can put them in the box or let us know. That's great.
Great. Thank you, Tracy and Eric. And as was mentioned, for more information, definitely, or for support, connect with your local public health units from your region. So we've had a few kind of summary points added to the chat function, which is a great idea. Our folks from TDSB highlighting the idea of working together as a grade team to come up with some common responses. Sean agreeing with some points relating to giving prior notice to the students, as well as making sure as educators we have as much knowledge as we need to feel comfortable with the topic area. So our next speaker is Ty Smith from EGAL Canada Human Rights Trust. So I will pass it over to Ty.
Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for having me be a part of this really great opportunity. And I look forward to this discussion with all of you. So I thought I would start with a little introduction of EGAL, a little bit about who we are as an organization. If I can just get my slide to move next. Here we go. So EGAL was founded in 1995, and it's Canada's only national charity advancing human rights based on sexual orientation and gender identity through research, education, and community engagement. Our vision is a Canada and ultimately a world without homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and all other forms of oppression, so that every person can achieve their full potential, free from hatred and bias. Quite lofty, but I think together we can achieve it. And so about what we do. So as mentioned, our main focus is research, community engagement, and education. And so some of the things that we're able to provide as research, policy, and resource development, we compile and produce and communicate the best available evidence, information, and tools for promoting and fostering the human rights and equitable inclusion of LGBTQ2S people throughout all aspects of society. And within that, we also provide supports for organizations and groups looking to review and develop their policy, developing resources. We can review them to ensure that the language is inclusive and remove any unintentional barriers. And then within programs and services, for which I am the director, we promote and foster human rights and equitable inclusion in communities, schools, and we work through consultation, training and development, and community engagement. We have a number of streams, such as Safer Schools, where we work with schools across the country, in addition, or most importantly, here in Ontario. We also have Safer Campuses, where we work with colleges and universities around LGBT inclusion. We have Safer Sport Inclusion. We work in partnership and collaboration with the Canadian Olympic Committee, You Can Play, and others in fostering safer sport on the recreational, provincial, national, and high performance levels. And we have our seniors program as well. And we really look to foster an intergenerational approach when it comes to LGBT inclusion. And in about a year and a half ago, we opened EGAL Youth Outreach, which offers individual counseling, homelessness, and suicide crisis services for LGBTQ2S youth up to age 29, provided by 3 full-time counselors. And individuals are also able to call in as well. That's a little bit about what we do here at EGAL. And so I think with that, we can jump right in, since a lot of the conversation so far has kind of set the stage to get into our scenario. And so within this is the assumption that we're talking a little bit about the key concepts of sex and gender. And so with the scenario, we have facilitating a discussion on the key concepts of sex, gender identity, gender expression, and attraction with a grade 7 class. A student jokes, what happened to boys being boys and girls being girls? And what happens when someone isn't masculine enough to be a boy or feminine enough to be a girl? And as we know, often in grade schools, people are learning about sex and gender, and it's often fairly normative and fixed. And so what we put out to you is for an opportunity to brainstorm your response to the students' comments, both on a reactive level. What would you do in the moment when confronted with this type of question, when dealing with the subject matter? And then what could you do proactively? What action will you take to try and avoid a situation like this in the future? And we'd love for you to consider how you can ensure a safe learning environment and deconstruct the questions while cultivating learning goals of critical thinking and understanding of self and others. I would love to see some of the ideas that the group might have. Anyone have any ideas about how you would address a student who makes a comment about boys being boys and girls being girls? And what if someone isn't masculine enough to be a boy or feminine enough to be a girl? What would you do in that moment? I see some typing is taking place, which is fantastic. And so I see here, dig in with students to figure out what this question or comment tells us about what they need to learn. Excellent. And how would you do so? How would you dig in? How does that look? We have from TDSB, who is to say what a real boy or what is a real girl? Absolutely. So perhaps posing that question to the group. We have from Matt, put it back to the student. What do you mean by boys being boys and girls being girls? And that's an excellent piece to engage them in that conversation. Kate puts out, discuss with the class what masculinity and femininity means in their minds. Great stuff. And Matt again talks about asking what the comment means. What is a boy and what is being a boy? And where did you learn that? Whose ideas are you using? And I see we have another comment coming. So these are some of the reactive responses in the moment. So Sean mentions agreeing with comments above, but also revisiting the ground rules. Consider how that might not be showing respect for all. And I really love that idea, Sean, in terms of setting ground rules, because often we will forget that in terms of having conversations around sensitive subject matter, it's really helpful from the onset to talk a little bit about what will be the expected behavior and language in having the discussion. What about some proactive strategies that you would use in advance so that you would maybe offset or mitigate having such comments when you were ready to address the content more specifically? What would you do proactively to avoid a situation like this in the future? And I see we have a few people typing. So Matt mentions discussing stereotypes in advance. That's great. So leading up to having a conversation that's specifically about sex and gender concepts, you can already start in another class talking about stereotypes. And Sean mentioned some direct instruction about gender identity and sexual orientation as a part of a larger discussion about identity and self-concept, which is great because often we can focus on this type of material only when we have to and forget about it throughout the rest of the year. And it's a really great idea to proactively integrate it in larger discussions so that you can start to help students to deconstruct and challenge assumptions and taken for granted norms or truths. I see being generally from TDSB, being generally aware of our language used in class and in school in general. Absolutely. It's really important to model for your students what is appropriate language when talking about sex and gender diversity. It's very subtle, but it sets the stage most definitely. And Sean writes, begin discussion about what makes us unique or feel welcome. And I really love that conversation as well. So it really helps students and everyone involved in the classroom to really feel like this is something that we can all connect to as an experience of being other in some way and what would help us to feel welcome. Also, Sean continues with use teachable moments when you hear comments about girls, boys, and other contexts. For example, throwing like a girl. Absolutely. This is a really critical piece in terms of challenging heterosexism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia throughout the year so that you start to normalize, you make it clear to students what is expected and to also model and to support them and coach them in using language that's more appropriate. Absolutely. These are really some great ideas that we have here. And so I think in the interest of time, I'll just share a little bit of, and some of it came out already, a little bit of what we have here at EGAL that we recommend in terms of talking about these key concepts. From a reactive place, we talk about inviting the students into a conversation, just as you had highlighted, around defining boys and girls, and really exploring and taking a moment to think about whether everyone is the same, identifying some of the ways in which people are different. And this is a really great exercise, again, to deconstruct and to guide them in challenging some assumptions. We then move into acknowledging the traditional sex and gender model that is very linear in its understanding, that one is assigned male or female at birth. You will identify as a boy, who then grows into a masculine man who's attracted to women, and vice versa. You'd be assigned female at birth, who grows into a little girl, who identifies as a woman who's feminine and is attracted to men. So acknowledging that that's the traditional sex and gender model with which most of us are familiar. And then we invite you to introduce the concept of the contemporary sex and gender model through the key concepts I'm about to introduce, followed by the continuum. And then you could also talk to them a little bit about the Human Rights Code here in Ontario that talks about gender diversity and what is expected in terms of rights and responsibilities, as well as the school policy, so that they understand that this is not just about values and creating safer space and welcoming space, but this is also our responsibility as citizens of Ontario and Canada. And in terms of proactive, setting the stage is really important. So beginning the school year with a conversation around policy and group expectations, engaging the students in developing class guidelines for inclusion, and then moving into your own mindful language, being really, really mindful about your language and integrating gender diversity throughout your curriculum and within your class environment, and consistently intervening in heterosexism, homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia. And part of, in closing, to support you in being able to do that, I'd like to introduce you to the Genderbread Person, which is an excellent tool, age-appropriate tool to share with students and to have this conversation and to lay down those foundations. And so first, what we have here is sex, or what we prefer, assigned sex. And so this is the category of male, female, or intersex that a person is assigned at birth based on biological characteristics. What's really important in terms of trans inclusion and inclusion around gender diversity is noting that this is a category that is assigned to a body. So it moves away from essentialist understandings and framing of sex and the sex binary to acknowledging it as a category, which starts to set the stage for trans and gender diversity inclusion. We then have gender identity, which is a person's innermost sense of their own gender. This can include man, woman, both, neither, or something else entirely. So assigned sex is about the body, specifically genitals, and gender identity being an individual sense of one's own gender. And this can refer to a variety of social and behavioral characteristics, and this is where you can engage the students in talking about these pieces. And that there are a lot of words that people may use to talk about their own gender identity. We then have, out of gender identity, gender expression. And gender expression is the way that an individual communicates their gender identity to others. And this is done through behavior, body language, voice, emphasis or de-emphasis of bodily characteristics, choice of clothing, hairstyle, and wearing makeup and/or accessories. So this is a really great opportunity to talk to the students about, let's name a few ways in which people are able to express their gender, such as being sporty. You can use images, photos from popular culture to help deconstruct and engage in this conversation. From gender expression, we recognize that it's the traits and behaviors associated with masculinity and femininity, and that they're culturally specific and that they change over time, and that's really key. Lastly, we close with attraction. And here, most people talk about it in terms of sexual orientation. We offer attraction as an alternative, as sexual orientation is often for resistance when you use that language. Parents, community members, family might be resistant, thinking that you're going to be talking about sex and sexuality that might be inappropriate for varying ages. But when you use the language of attraction, it leaves room for the broad range of ways in which we connect with one another and really enables us to have a more age-appropriate approach. So here we offer the definition of attraction, aka sexual orientation, as the emotional, romantic, and physical attraction to and intimate and sexual relations with individuals of a particular sex and/or gender. And so again, you'll see here, we can talk about being emotionally attracted to someone, romantically attracted to someone. We can talk about being physically attracted, meaning you like the way someone looks. And then there is the rest along the continuum. And it just leaves a really broad range for discussion. Within this, we recognize that humans are complex and that the linear chart produces the most basic understanding. So when I talked about our traditional understanding of sex and gender, it is very much within a binary with a linear trajectory. So in terms of sex and gender, most of us understand the linear binary, in which one is either assigned a male at birth and expected to grow into a masculine man attracted to women, and vice versa. However, this model that you see on your screen, or the one that I'm just talking about, doesn't really account for the multitudes of gender expressions, identities, and attraction that actually exist among all people. And this slide illustrates the multiple ranges of expression and identity that leaves a little bit more room for all of us that exist on this wonderful globe. And this model is far more inclusive of all people and avoids a narrow trajectory. And so this is a really, really great visual tool to be able to ground the conversation with students. And another visual tool that I'd like to leave you with is a video that you can find on YouTube. It's about 17 minutes in length, and it's called Trans Basics, produced by the Center, formerly known as the LGBT Center in New York City. Again, it's called Trans Basics. It's a 17-minute video that introduces the concept of sex and gender and trans and genderqueer individuals. It has a trans woman who happens to be Laverne Cox from Orange is the New Black, a genderqueer individual, and a trans man talking about their lived experience around identity formation, coming out, and accessing services. It's a really great tool. Do check it out. And with that, that is my time, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ty. So for more information or support, please contact EGAL or visit their website at egal.ca. So what makes schools safer for all of our students? In order to make schools safe, it's important for us as educators to keep a few practices in mind. Breaking cycles of silence and stigma. This includes learning how to talk about the diversity of identities within our classrooms, which includes the LGBTQ identities. They are personal, political, complex, evolving, and intersect with other identities, such as race, class, ethnicity, and others. We can address and effectively intervene in harassment and bullying. This includes all forms of bullying, both in person and online. Making sure to not position LGBTQ identities as an add-on or an exception. When instructing, it's important to normalize the fact that a variety of identities are present at the same time in our classrooms. This can be accomplished by speaking about diverse family structures, visible and invisible differences, as well as LGBTQ identities and families. Tools we can use to do this include posters and resources, but also simply in the way we speak, and therefore in the way we implement the curriculum and work with students in day-to-day interactions. And of course, challenging heterosexism and cissexism in our schools. This means shifting our focus from heterosexuality, heterosexual students, and heterosexual families as the norm. We can do this through identifying heterosexuality in curriculum, culture, practice, and language, and making appropriate changes. Not only does this change make students with non-normative experiences feel visible and included, but it reinforces for all students that there are more than one valid way of being. And so as we wrap up today, we just wanted to highlight our the time of our final webinar in our series. Please check out the information there on the slide and throw something in your calendar to make sure that you'll be able to join us once the information is available. Now, to help us prepare for our final webinar in the series, we are looking to have teachers with experience in human development and sexual health provide us with strategies and practices that are tried and true. So what are some questions that you might have for these teachers? We would love if you could please share some of your questions right now about human development and sexual health instruction in the poll, and we'll use these questions to guide our next chat happening April-May. You'll see it on the right-hand side. And so as we wrap up, we look forward to having you join us in April. But in the meantime, please do not hesitate to contact us about our human development and sexual health lesson plans or any of our health and physical education support. Please take a moment now to let us know some questions that you might have by putting those questions for our next webinar in the top right area of the screen, and then taking a moment to complete the evaluation, which will be shared through a link in the comment section. However you're getting home tonight, please make sure that you travel safe, and we will see you in April-May for our next webinar. If you do have any questions, please stay on the line, and we will get to those now. So we see one question which we'll explore during our third webinar from the TDSB in the question area. If you have any other questions right off the top of your head, you could submit them now, and we'll be sure to get our teachers during webinar 3 to respond. And if you can't think of anything now, we will have an opportunity to put these questions into the webinar, put these questions in when you register for the webinar. So we'll have opportunity to share your questions then. If you have a moment to complete the survey, which we'll put back into the chat function so you can find it more easily, we will do that now, and then we will be wrapping up soon. Thank you.